What is going on, guys? It is Trifecta J here, and welcome back to the Mount Pleasant Dynasty. We got to look at this team in the spring game. If you haven't already watched that, I do recommend you go do that. We got a good introduction to a lot of players on this team, and today it's going to be the season preview for year one of this dynasty. We're going to go through redshirting, depth chart, and get a good look at our recruiting board to start off this year, as it was nice to see the players who will be making an impact in year one, really see them on the field for the first time and see what they are able to do. As Colby Lucas scoring a touchdown there were a lot of highlight plays, a lot of players making an impact and making a case for early playing time. As we will start off, we know this roster and some of the players on it well now. But like I said, this will be the season one preview. We're going to go through the schedule and really everything we need to get prepared for year one of this dynasty. Now, this is the players who are redshirt. Only 3 true freshmen will not be redshirted. Carl Gray, Mike Meadows does get the redshirt. A couple of these players, most importantly Mike Meadows and Robbie Golden, are true freshmen who could have that redshirt removed if we need them to play, if our offense isn't really clicking. But the starting quarterback for game one and moving forward in the season will be Jonathan Gibbs. I know some of you did like what you saw from Colby Lucas, especially as a runner, but Jonathan Gibbs, I feel like, does give us the best chance to win, and he will be the starter week one, and the opponent of that will be coming up in a little bit. Like I mentioned in the first episode, our offensive line is very young, 1 senior, and then the rest are either true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or a true sophomore. So that's definitely going to be an area of concern moving forward, and also a position that should actually be a strength for us in the near future as those players do progress. Leroy Red and Markel Reyes will be the starting corners, and Torian Contrell, who was a spring game MVP, will now be the backup safety at both spots and will play in the 3 safety looks that we will use on occasion. But this program is led by Tyler Johnson, and he will lead them for the first game, the inaugural game of this program, at home against Georgia State. Georgia State, a team that in just the last couple years were in the same position as us. And then in week 2, we will be taking on the number 2 ranked Clemson Tigers, a tough game, followed by East Carolina, UL Monroe, Virginia, Mississippi State, South Alabama, Wake Forest, Texas State, Tennessee, Troy, and UAB. We're only playing 5 home games. It's hard to get home games when you're a brand new program. We're playing a number of Power 5 teams though, getting some nice revenue for our program and also some nice experience for our players. Also playing a number of Sun Belt teams, as like I said in the first episode, we will be transitioning into the Sun Belt in year 2. So getting some nice looks at some of those teams, and then finishing off the year against UAB, who has just restarted their football program and should be a pretty even match for us. But Connor Shaw and defense coordinator Shaq Wilson are focusing on pass rushing and ball security to start off the season. But you can see the first game will be against Georgia State. Like I said, they started their football program up in 2010, and they've started to really turn their program into a nice group of 5 program. But you can see Kirk Herbstreit is picking the Demons in their first game. He believes in us, and that should make fans feel good. But now looking at the top 10, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Florida State are your top 4. You have Tennessee at number 9, Clemson at number 2, both teams that we'll be playing this year. You also have North Carolina, a team that we'll probably play in the future, as they are pretty close to us and they are in a pipeline state. But we are ranked 121st to start off, one of the worst teams ranking wise, and in the independents we're one of the worst ranked teams as well. You can't really, this isn't really a conference, so it's not really the standings or conference outlook really tells you much, but just shows you where you stack up against some of the other independents. Now we're moving into recruiting and the strengths of this program right now. Academic prestige. This is a nice campus lifestyle. It's near Charleston, one of the nicer cities in America in my opinion. The athletic facilities aren't great, and then the rest of the program, another thing that's not a lot of real positives here. If you want to go pro, if you want to play in a good conference, play for a championship contender, or play for a prestigious coach, this right now is not the school for you. Tyler Johnson's really got to build up his name if he wants to be able to get those high-rated recruits in the Southeast. Now look at our pipeline: South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida, and that's where all but one of our prospects right now are located. Really trying to nail down these pipeline states and get the best talent out of them we can. In these states, though, you're going to have to compete with Georgia, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Clemson, North Carolina, all the other schools in North Carolina, and the schools in Florida along with the other Southeast and really the entire country, as a lot of schools do try and look for the Southeast for it, because there's just it's a hotbed of talent, and we're gonna have to really go for those overlooked guys in the state of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and really our pipeline states, the teams that schools, the Power 5 schools and top schools in the states aren't really trying to go after, the ones that we're gonna have to try and find those gem prospects to start out, really build up this program. But now you can see 13 seniors on this roster, a ton of freshmen, only 3 seniors on offense as a whole. So not a lot of offensive players will be leaving. That's good for next year, and this should be a lot of experience for our offense. Defense does have 10 graduating players, a number of key contributors as well, 2 defensive linemen both starting, and 3 defensive tackles. Now looking at the top recruits in the nation, none of these players are considering us, as you would expect. They're really trying to go to established programs. You can see Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Southern Cal are the top guys, really competing for a lot of these prospects. But the state of South Carolina has 95 players, a good bit of talent, only a few elite players every year though. And for the majority, those players will go to your South Carolina, Clemson, UGA, North Carolina, and we're gonna have to compete for some of these overlooked guys like some of these tackles. A lot of offensive linemen actually from the state of South Carolina this year, which is good to see. That's definitely a place that we're gonna need to build up in the future. Defensive tackle has a number of players. You have guys like Ricky Bracken considering Auburn, LSU. Like I said, those really talented guys. Greg Holmes, the 42nd player, that's a guy you would love to have, but at the same time, it's going to be difficult to really get those guys to come to your school when you're just not established yet. Now looking at our pipeline, 574 players are available in our pipeline states, the 4 that we do have. So that is a ton of different players that we can choose from. Now looking at players who have us in their top 10 schools, there's 88 players. That's a nice number to see. Then top 5, 85. So not a very big drop off from top 10. And then top 3, these are guys who are really considering us, 58 players. Now a lot of those players are very low rated, so that's not necessarily the number. It's a little deceiving. And then top overall have us as the #1 school. There's 24 players. That's a very nice number to see. Looking at some of these guys, you have Antoine Marshall, Ryan Clay, Brad Hall, a tackle from York, South Carolina, a guy their defensive end from Mount Pleasant. That's definitely a guy that we should definitely be targeting. A couple from Mount Pleasant, which is nice to see. Those are guys that have us as a high interest, and definitely have a high interest in them, trying to keep them close to home. Now we will look at our top 10 recruits. You have Brad Hall, TJ Hines, Nathan Johnson, Eric Green, Steve Lewis, Kevin Johnson, Ernest Harrison, Eric Moore, Carl Riggs, and Stevie Harris. All of them are from pipeline states, except for Eric Green. The #1 prospect on our board, Brad Hall, he wants playing time and pro potential from a program, and we're competing with South Carolina. So if he wants to play early, we are probably his top choice. But if he's really focused on trying to get to the NFL, South Carolina probably gives him a better opportunity to do that. He's a very balanced blocker and a very talented player, and like I said, the #1 player on our board. Next up is TJ Hines from Florida, 6'4", 242, only a 2-star pass rusher, but he's a guy that has a lot of ability. He is looking for early playing time. That was a big theme of this. Also wants to stay close to home. He's not the most athletic guy, but does have some nice developmental traits. He could get a little faster, a little stronger, get better at pass rushing, and should be a very nice player competing with Iowa State for him. Next up is sophomore junior college transfer from South Carolina, Nathan Johnson. He is another guy who wants to play early and stay close to home, and we can offer him both of those things, as he's a good athlete, 82 speed, and he doesn't do much else. He's more than an athlete and would be a developmental guy and would probably redshirt. Next is an athlete, and that is Eric Green from Findlay, Ohio, 6'1", and I see him as a quarterback. He doesn't have the highest interest in us, but he is a great athlete for a quarterback, has a pretty good arm, and could develop into a very nice player for us if he would come to us. But he's also considering a lot of schools that have a much higher rating for the things that he is really interested in. Next up from Florida, Steve Lewis, a fullback. We don't currently have a fullback on our roster. He wants to play early and stay close to home. A little concerned though about Coach Prestige, but he is a great athlete, very fast, and could be a very nice player to develop as a blocker. Right now he's pretty good at it. Next up from Mount Pleasant, one of our top players on the board. These guys really, it's not a definitive order in the way that they're ranked, but he wants to stay close to home and play early. Definitely worried about conference prestige. He's fast, not the quickest, and can hit a little bit. Does need to develop as a cover guy, but has some nice size at 6'1". Next up is athlete 6 foot 231 from Savannah, Georgia. Another guy, he's a little concerned about television exposure though. He isn't the fastest guy, doesn't have blazing speed, but can play offense or defense as a running back who's more of a power guy, or a safety, maybe a strong safety, or maybe even a linebacker. After him is from Concord, North Carolina, the outside linebacker, 3-star guy, A+ playing time, wants to play early, and he is the best athlete in terms of linebackers that we have on our board. He doesn't do much else, so he'll definitely have to develop. After him is the 88th ranked tackle, 6'6", 301. He has better size than Brad Hall. He's from Florida. He weighs 301 compared to the 264 Brad Hall, and he's another gym prospect. He's strong, good run blocker, needs to improve as a pass blocker. And the final guy on our board from Greenville, North Carolina, he's a quarterback, 6'1", and he is talented. He's not much of a runner, not the fastest guy. He runs around a 4.7 40, but has a strong arm, needs to develop as in terms of accuracy. And then the rest of our board, David Pope, Logan Spencer, a few athletes. It was nice to see some of them take an interest in us as a team. A few offensive linemen, not the biggest concern for us this year, as we are very young, only one senior on our offensive line as a whole, Antoine Marshall. You have John Miller, Keel Hall, a guy not the fastest, but does have some nice make you miss ability. And then towards the bottom of the board, you have Jeff Thomas. But that was a very preliminary look at our recruiting board. It's definitely going to change as the season goes on. But our first game in week 1 will be at home. To me, it's a very winnable game. We'll be taking on Georgia State, led by Connor Manning, their quarterback. He has a pretty nice arm. He's sort of similar to Jonathan Gibbs. Then at wide receiver, you have Robert Davis. He's 6'3", so that'll be something we're going to have to contend with. He has some strong hands and is pretty fast for his size. Another receiver, he is a smaller guy, and he has some make you miss ability. He can go up and get the football and is very fast, and he'll be another tough guy to contend with. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Bobby Baker, the senior safety. He can tackle, he can hit, and he can also cover, and he has some nice range. Alonzo McGee, he's a guy who can rush the passer, cover, and another good athlete, so he's someone that we're going to have to look out for on the defense. And finally is Shawayne Lawrence. He's a pass rusher, 6'4", 275, so he's a pretty big guy, but he can get after the quarterback. But that will do it for this episode and the season preview. We'll finally get to see this team on the football field as they will be taking on Georgia State. And like I said, what I believe to be a very winnable game, but I hope you did enjoy this episode. If you did, please leave a like down below. Leave your comments on this season. What is your win prediction for this team? What are your first thoughts about our recruiting board? Which players do you like the most? Which ones do you think we should really heavily focus on and trying to get for the future of this team? But I hope you did enjoy, and I hope you were just excited as I am to see this team on the field for the first game in program history. I will see you at Mount Pleasant Stadium in the next couple of days for week 1 against Georgia State. I hope you did enjoy, 'cause I'm out.